So in the previous PowerPoint, we discussed the characteristics that mark something as a living organism. Now, when we take a look at humans, humans are considered to be multicellular. More specifically, they're made up of trillions upon trillions of cells that are used to make our organ systems. Now, these organ systems, as you can see, some of them are depicted. We have your cardiovascular system at the center. You have your digestive system on the side, you have your urinary system on the bottom, and then your respiratory system working closely with your lungs. And that's basically the general systems that you have in your body. But overall, you actually have a total of 11 systems. These are just some of the main ones that are mentioned here. So for the next few slides, we will be looking at what are these systems and what are some of the structures and functions associated with each. So one of the most basic systems we have in our body are your skeletal system and your muscle system. So a skeletal system are basically your bones, your cartilage, and ligaments and tendons that forms the skeletal system, and their job is to basically provide you a framework, as well as providing some levels of protection, and with the help of a skeletal muscle give you the ability to move. Now, going with your skeletal system, we have muscular system. Even though we have three different types of muscles, when we talk about this system, we usually focus on the skeletal muscle system. That includes basically any muscles that are connected to the skeletal system, and they can create voluntary motions in your body associated with typically your movement, your posture, as well as producing heat to maintain your body temperature. We have nervous system. Simply put, there are three main structures or organs associated with them: your nerves, your brain, and a spinal cord. And the main functions of that is basically controlling the activity of the rest of the body by sorry, I should say coordinating and controlling the activities within your body by changing either muscle contraction, by allowing glands to secrete their enzymes or their hormones, and basically through those actions and through electrical impulses, enabling you to create or control your body activities. Um, Going hand in hand with the nervous system, we have the endocrine system. In this case, we're not relying on the electrical impulses that were used during the nervous system activities. Rather, in endocrine system, we rely on release of hormones from some of the glands that are listed, such as thymus, pituitary gland, your gonads, which are basically your sex organs, pancreas, and renal glands. And using the hormone, you can control basically the activity of the body. So in that sense, they're very similar to the nervous system. We have cardiovascular system, as I mentioned earlier, made up of your heart, blood, and blood vessels, and their job is to basically work as a transport system to transport the oxygen and nutrients your cells need to survive, and collect any waste products from those structures. Going with cardiovascular system, we have lymphatic system that are drawn in green lines, as well as some of the organs. Lymphatic system is actually made up of lymphatic vessels, very similar to blood vessels. We have a spleen, thymus, your bone marrow is basically a structure that carries the cells of the immune cells. And there's two main functions associated with the immune system, or with your lymphatic system. The word immunity implies they're responsible for defense of the body. They also collect any leaks from the cardiovascular system. Hence, lymphatic system works very closely with the cardiovascular system. We will discuss this in more detail as we talk about each of these systems throughout the semester. Respiratory system is another system that works closely with the cardiovascular system. The structures associated with the respiratory system include your Some of the structures associated with the digestive system include the oral cavity or your mouth, esophagus, the stomach, intestines. You also have accessory glands, including your liver and pancreas. The two main functions associated with this system include digestion, which basically means breakdown of your food, and then distribution of those nutrients after the process of absorption, which basically bringing the food into your blood vessels and circulating it into the body. Urinary system, as we mentioned, includes your kidney, ureter, which is the tooth, urinary bladder, and urethra. And its main role is to basically remove and excrete any type of waste associated with your metabolism. That includes nitrogenous waste, such as urea and uric acid. It's also responsible for acid water levels are okay in your body, and electrolyte balance. That's something else. Electrolyte meaning hydrogen, potassium, chloride, calcium, etc. Integumentary system is made up of your skin, that's basically covering your body, acting as a boundary. You also have accessory structures such as your hair and your nails that are associated with this system, as well as what's around the same gland. Some of the main functions associated with the integumentary system is creation of vitamin D from sunlight. You have receptors that basically give you the sense of touch or somatosensory. It also enables you to basically protect yourself from any environmental harms such as bacteria, viruses, infection. Reproductive system, in the case of males, some of the main structures are prostate, penis, testes, and a scrotum. And in females would be mammary tissue or breast tissue, uterus, vagina, ovaries, and uterine tube. In both cases, the main goal is to basically produce sex cells and sex hormones and enabling the creation of the offspring. Now, we will discuss this in 251 in much more detail. Now, for a structure to be able to survive, for an organism to be able to survive, you need the following structures or following supply. You need nutrients, which basically means your food, oxygen, that comes from your breathing, water, normal body temperature, that's the concept we will talk about in just a minute, that's homeostasis, and associate atmospheric pressure. Because without having the atmospheric pressure, you will not be able to breathe, which means no air exchange and no oxygen. Here's a little bit more detail about the structures and each of the components we need to survive. Nutrients, basically your main groups of food, carbs, proteins, and fats. And we can also include mineral and vitamins, which supplements your diet. Water, 60% of your body is water, and majority of the chemical reactions are carried in an environment dependent on water. Oxygen, you need that for your metabolism. So you would be able to survive for a few minutes without the presence of oxygen by relying on different techniques, but at the end you do require oxygen for survival. Your normal body temperature is about 37 degrees, and basically it ensures that the proteins and the molecules inside your body are working effectively. Atmosphere, as we mentioned earlier, has to do with your ability to properly breathe and bring in air that is required for your body activity. Now, the last concept we will discuss here is the concept of homeostasis. If I want to put the concept of homeostasis in a very simple sense, I will simplify it to maintenance of an internal environment. Now, some of the components that can be maintained via homeostasis include your body temperature, your calcium level, your glucose level, your now I can't think of anything else. Of course, those are the three that I can see in front of me. But the reason we need this homeostasis is because your body needs to be able to work under a very specific condition. So if these conditions are not maintained, therefore your body will not be able to survive. Now, some of the other homeostasis that came to mind is blood pressure, heart rate, respiration. These are also components associated or maintained under homeostasis. Now, to be able to effectively control homeostasis, you rely on feedback system, more specifically negative feedback system for majority of the system, which basically when you get to the bottom of the system, this system automatically shuts itself off. So to make sure that you do not go beyond the acceptable range and be able to maintain your homeostasis. Positive feedback, on the other hand, will create a loop or a vortex that basically, when you create the final response in the homeostasis, that causes an amplification of the feedback. So the more you feed it, the bigger it gets, basically. Versus negative feedback, when you reach a certain number, then your system will shut off. Now, as I mentioned, almost all of your systems in your body are maintained through negative feedback, such as body temperature, blood glucose, heart rate, respiration. Positive feedback, there's two really good examples. One is basically muscle contraction created by a hormone called oxytocin during childbirth, because you don't want to go like, oops, I contracted the muscle, so I'm going to stop. And then, oh, I need to contract, and I stop. What you want to do is build up the contraction so the baby can be born. Same thing with platelet plugs. That gives you basically your ability to stop bleeding. So if you fix it a little bit and then you stop it because of negative feedback, you can reopen that wound again. So using a platelet plug, the more you bring, it attracts more components, it attracts more platelets, and as a result, you can actually complete the process and close the wound completely, rather than relying on a negative feedback, which just slows down the process and basically will not allow you to stop the bleeding. Now, when we talk about homeostatic feedback, this is basically the components you need to know: stimulus, sensor, integrator, output, effector, response, and result. A stimulus is basically a change within your homeostasis. Going back to the example I was discussing with you, your body temperature, the stimulus would be body temperature going above or below the 37 degree, which is acceptable. Now, within your body, you will have something or a structure that recognizes the change that is happening, and that's referred to as sensor. Now, when that sensor detected the change, it's going to basically report to its boss, which we refer to as integrator. When the boss notices the change, it's going to send out a message. That message that comes out, either as a source of an electrical impulse or an hormone, what it does, it's going to basically go and target specific structures in your body. Those targets are referred to as effectors. The changes the effectors undergo because of the output is referred to as response. And if all of your responses go accordingly, you return everything back to normal, and that is considered to be your result. So let's take a look at a couple of words when we discuss this, and then we'll go to an example. Set point. Set point is an ideal number that is basically considered to be what you want to be at. For instance, for body temperature, that number would be 37 degrees centigrade. Error would be a small amount of change within the set point, which is still acceptable, but we just don't want to go too far from the error. So a normal range, for instance, for body temperature is half a degree below 37 and half a degree above the 37. So would be basically your error range would be 36.5 to 37.5. Now, if you go above or below this error point, then that's what triggers your homeostatic feedback loop. So let's take a look at the example for body temperature. As I mentioned, the stimulus would be increase in body temperature. It could as easily be decrease in body temperature. What identify the change in body temperature would be thermal receptors, thermal as in temperature, receptors as receptors, that are present in two locations, a skin and a gland inside your brain called hypothalamus. Now in this case, your sensor and your integrator are partially the same. So hypothalamus notices the change and also acts as an integrator that's going to create a response. So hypothalamus is part of your brain, and it's going to send a message to the following effectors: your skin, as well as the blood vessels of your skin, as well as the sweat glands of your skin. So these are effectors, structures, organs. The response of these signal would be blood vessels are going to open up or vasodilate. Vaso, blood, dilate, open, opening blood vessels. Sorry, vaso means vessels. So in that case, you have more blood coming to the surface of the skin, and as a result, you can release more blood. So you can release more heat through the process of radiation. So you turn red basically. And you start to produce sweat using sweat glands to basically cool yourself down. If this process happened correctly, then your result would be decrease in body temperature. Note that there is a negative feedback loop in this process, which I'm sorry I didn't show the arrow in this case, but it starts from the result and goes back to the stimulus. So you basically going to shut this system down as soon as you reach normal body temperature. Because if the system does not get shut off, you continue to decrease the body temperature, and as a result, you basically go to the other extreme. Another example that I provided for you here, and you do need to know the numbers and the structures, is your blood glucose level that are also maintained through homeostasis. So the stimulus in this scenario is an increase in blood glucose level above a set point, which is 120 milligram per deciliter. When that happens, in this case, your sensor and integrator is still the same, are cells called beta cells of the islands of Langerhans, and you can also know that these structures are found inside your pancreas. And when they notice that the blood glucose is high, they start to produce insulin and hormone. So in this scenario, your insulin is going to act as your output. Now, this output is going to have multiple effectors. What are those effectors? Your body cells, the adipose tissue, your liver, and a skeletal muscle. What is insulin going to do to these structures? Is going to allow these structures to take in the extra glucose and convert it to a more complex version of the carbohydrate called glycogen. Now, when you take that glucose out of the blood, the result of that would be drop in the blood glucose below that 110 milligram per deciliter. Notice that there is a red arrow going from the bottom to the top. This implies that you have a negative feedback loop kicking in, so you don't drop the blood glucose below the normal level. Here is an example of the positive feedback loop, where you have basically damage to a blood vessel. You release platelets. When you have platelets, you actually require more platelets or attract more platelets. So you have a positive feedback loop going at the center, and that causes the damaged blood vessel to be plugged. If there is any sort of disturbance in your homeostasis feedback, that usually can cause disease. A really good example of that would be failure in the negative feedback loop or feedback loop of homeostasis associated with insulin. So here in this case, we have two types of diabetes, diabetes mellitus 1 and 2. Now, in the case of diabetes, you have two scenarios. You either will not be able to produce insulin, as it shows by the first arrow. This is your pancreas not being able to produce insulin, or your body produces insulin, which is your output. However, that insulin is not affected, the effectors are not sensitive to your insulin. So I'm going to read this one more time. So in this scenario, when we talk about type 1 or type 2 diabetes, in type 1 diabetes, the pancreas, which is your integrator, is failing to produce the output insulin. That's the first blue arrow. We also have a second scenario, which is type 2 diabetes, where the output is present. However, the effectors are insensitive to the output. In both of these scenarios, your blood glucose will increase, and that's basically describing the lack of negative feedback loop that causes the disease called diabetes. So that's about it. Be very comfortable with the concept of diabetes, sorry, not diabetes, the concept of homeostasis. Know the components. In exams, I usually expect you guys to be able to recreate these charts. I do expect you to also know what happens when your body temperature falls below the 36.5. So do some research and make sure you are able to work through the steps. And if you have any questions, please let me know on Wednesday. Thank you.